The storm outside rattled against the glass windows of the grand mansion, a low growl of thunder rolling across the sky as though echoing the tension that was about to unfold. Ethan Miller, a man known in the business world as ruthless, untouchable, and brilliantly wealthy, had just stepped out of his sleek black car and into the towering home he had bought with silent pride years ago. Tonight, though, was different. It wasn't the storm that weighed heavy on him. It was the fatigue of another soulless trip, another deal, another victory that felt like nothing. He loosened his tie as he entered the marble-floored hallway. The house, as always, stood quiet, echoing his footsteps like a reminder of how empty his life had become. The staff usually retreated into their quarters by this hour, and the mansion itself felt less like a home and more like a museum, immaculate but lifeless. But as Ethan made his way upstairs, a sound stopped him, a sound that didn't belong in this palace of silence. It was the sound of muffled crying. At first he froze, his brows knitting together. The sound was faint, almost drowned out by the storm outside, but it was there, broken sobs carried from behind the door of his bedroom. His bedroom. He frowned. Nobody ever went into his room without permission. His rules were strict, his staff too disciplined to dare. Yet tonight, someone was inside. Slowly, he pushed open the heavy door, and what he saw made him pause. There, by the corner of his bed, was a young woman in a simple maid's uniform, her hands pressed to her face as she wept quietly, her shoulders trembling with the weight of emotions she seemed unable to contain. Ethan's first instinct was irritation. How dare someone invade his private space? But as he took a step closer, his irritation was drowned out by something unexpected, curiosity, maybe even concern. The woman lifted her face in shock, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She scrambled to her feet, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I didn't mean to. I'll leave right away." But Ethan raised a hand, halting her. "Stop." His voice was firm, but not as harsh as it usually was in boardrooms and offices. "Why are you here? Why are you crying in my room?" The maid hesitated, her fingers fidgeting nervously with the edge of her apron. "It won't happen again, I swear." "That's not an answer," Ethan said, his eyes narrowing but not unkindly. Her lips quivered, and for a long moment silence filled the room, broken only by the storm outside. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't know where else to go." Those words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Something in her tone, raw, broken, desperate, pulled at a part of him he had long buried. "Sit down," he said quietly, motioning to the edge of the bed. The maid froze, startled by his unexpected gentleness, but something in his steady gaze told her he wasn't asking out of authority, he was asking out of concern. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. "What's your name?" he asked. "Leela," she murmured. "How long have you been working here?" "3 weeks, sir." Ethan frowned. 3 weeks. He barely noticed her presence, as was often the case with the people around him. He hired staff through agencies and rarely remembered their faces. But tonight, he was noticing. For the first time in years, he truly looked at someone who wasn't part of his world of deals and numbers. "Now tell me, Leela," he said softly, "why are you crying?" Her throat tightened, and for a moment she seemed ready to bolt out of the room. But then, as though the weight of her secret had become unbearable, she let out a shaky breath. "My brother," she whispered. "He's in the hospital. He's only 16 and they said he needs surgery. I've been trying to gather the money, but no matter how much I work, I can't. I thought maybe working in a place like this would help, but it's not enough. And tonight when the doctor called and said time is running out, I just broke." Her voice cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks again. Ethan felt something twist inside him. For years, he had built walls around his heart, convincing himself that emotions were weaknesses. But watching this young woman crumble in his room, clutching her pain as though it were her last possession, something inside him stirred, something painfully familiar. He remembered his own past, the nights of hunger when his father abandoned them, the days his mother worked 3 jobs just to keep him in school. He remembered promising himself that he would never be powerless again, never be desperate again. He had fulfilled that promise, but at the cost of forgetting what it felt like to be human. For the first time in years, he felt that humanity claw its way back. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Ethan asked quietly. "Because I don't want pity," Leela whispered, "and because people like me were invisible to people like you." The words were sharp, unintentional, but honest. Ethan didn't flinch. He knew she was right. He had built his empire on never seeing the faces of the people beneath him, and yet here was one, forcing him to look. Silence stretched between them, filled with the storm's rage outside. Finally, Ethan stood. "Get up," he said. Leela blinked, confused. "Sir." "Come with me." She hesitated, but something in his tone, steady, commanding, but not unkind, made her obey. Together they walked down the grand staircase, through the quiet halls until they reached his study. Ethan switched on the lights, revealing walls lined with books and shelves, a massive desk covered with papers. He opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, and began writing. Leela's breath caught. "What are you doing?" "Paying for your brother's surgery," Ethan said simply. Her eyes widened in disbelief. I can't accept that. I barely even know you." "And I barely know you," Ethan interrupted, "but I know what it's like to feel powerless. I know what it's like to cry in silence because no one's listening. So let me do this." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Tears blurred her vision as he tore out the check and handed it to her. "This isn't charity," he said firmly. "Consider it a debt I owe the world for forgetting where I came from." Leela stared at the paper in her hand, her fingers trembling as though it might disappear. "You don't know what this means," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan's eyes softened. "Actually, I do." That night something shifted in Ethan Miller's world. For the first time, his mansion didn't feel so empty. For the first time, he felt something other than hollow victories. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself thinking about Leela more than he cared to admit. Not because of her tears, but because of her strength, the quiet courage of a girl who carried the weight of her family on fragile shoulders. When Leela's brother recovered after surgery, she came back to work, her gratitude quiet but immeasurable. Ethan expected things to return to normal, but they didn't. He found himself drawn to small conversations with her, to the way she spoke with honesty that no one else dared. She didn't see him as a millionaire, a CEO, or a powerful man. She saw him as a person, and that was something he hadn't been in a long time. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Leela said softly, "You know, sir, money can buy a lot, but it can't buy the feeling you gave me that night, the feeling that someone cared." Her words pierced him because he realized she was right. For years he had chased wealth, thinking it would fill the void. But in that moment he understood it was human connection, kindness, and compassion that gave life meaning. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan found himself changing. He became softer with his staff, more present in his own home. He even started a foundation to help families like Leela's, a decision that shocked the business world but felt like redemption to him. And through it all, Leela remained by his side, not as just a maid but as a reminder. A reminder that even the richest man can feel poor without compassion, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save not just one life, but two. Ethan Miller had returned home a millionaire, but for the first time, he felt like something far greater. A man with a heart that finally remembered how to feel. And in the quiet of his mansion, where loneliness once echoed, there was now something new. Laughter, warmth, hope. The storm had passed. And in its place, a new story had begun.